June 4th, 1942, 5:30 a.m. The Pacific Ocean, north of Midway Atoll. The deck of the aircraft carrier Akagi trembles beneath your boots as engines wind up in the half-light. The air smells of aviation fuel and salt. Wind lashes across the bow, snapping signal flags and flattening the white caps below. Somewhere aft, a whistle shrills. A flight deck officer raises his arm, then slashes it downward. The first, Mitsubishi R6M0, surges forward, its engine, screaming tail lifting wheels, vanishing as it leaps into the sky. From the island structure, Vice Admiral Nagumo Chuichi, commander of the 1st Air Fleet, watches through binoculars. His face is calm, unreadable. Around him, staff officers murmur confirmations. Fuel pressures, normal winds, favorable visibility, improving. The morning haze is thinning exactly as forecast. Everything is proceeding according to plan. Below deck in ready rooms, still warm from human bodies and cigarette smoke. The men who launched moments earlier are already spoken of as instruments, not individuals. They are experienced elite, fully trained. Their losses, if losses come, are assumed to be manageable. The doctrine has never been questioned. On the flight line, Chief Petty Officer Koichi Shiga, a veteran aircraft mechanic, watches the next Zero taxi into position. He has serviced this engine personally. Every valve clearance measured by hand, every line inspected twice. He knows the pilot Petty Officer First Class Masao Yamaguchi, trained for nearly a decade, drilled in deflection shooting formation, flying fuel discipline. Years of investment ride inside that cockpit. Years that cannot be replaced. But no one says that aloud. Not here. Not now. The Imperial Japanese Navy has built its air arm like a sword slowly forged, folded again and again, sharpened to perfection. Training is ruthless. Washout rates are brutal. Only the best survive. Instructors believe skill is everything. Instinct, feel, aggression refined by endless practice. A pilot is not a product. He is a rarity. That belief permeates every decision on Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu this morning. In the flag plot, charts are spread across tables, weighted at the corners. Red grease pencil marks indicate enemy positions as they are expected to exist, not as they are known. The Americans are assumed to be reactive, slow, predictable. Their pilots, poorly trained. Their carrier air groups, inexperienced. Numbers alone cannot compensate for quality. That assumption has been proven over China, over Pearl Harbor, over the Java Sea. At 5:34 a.m., another Zero roars off the deck. Then, a Nakajima B-5N, Kate torpedo bomber, heavy with ordnance. Then an Aichi D-3A Val dive bomber, its fixed landing gear rattling as it accelerates. Each aircraft carries not just bombs and fuel, but doctrine. Years of belief hardened into certainty. Nagumo lowers his binoculars. Launch the remainder, he orders quietly. No urgency, no doubt. Far below, waves roll endlessly eastward, reflecting the rising sun in shattered silver. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Midway Atoll waits, small, exposed, already marked for destruction. Its airfields are to be neutralized, its defenders crushed. The Americans, if they respond at all, will do so late. At least that is what the planning assumes. In the carrier's wardroom, a young intelligence officer adjusts his glasses and glances at a chalkboard tallying expected enemy aircraft. The numbers are low, almost insulting. He hesitates, then says nothing. He has learned which doubts are unwelcome. The intercom crackles. All aircraft airborne. Nagumo nods once. The first phase is complete. What he does not see, what no one aboard the Japanese carrier sees, is the web already tightening around them. Not because of brilliance in the moment, but because of systems built far from this ocean. Training pipelines, replacement schedules, factories humming day and night, classrooms filled with men who will never become aces, but will become adequate and then numerous. At this moment, Japanese confidence is absolute because it has never been seriously tested against an enemy that can afford loss. Below decks, armorers begin resetting racks. Fuel hoses are dragged into place. Spare aircraft are spotted for potential second-wave launches. Everything is prepared with the assumption that the men now flying will return, that even if some do not, enough will. The idea that trained aviators themselves might be the limiting resource, the fragile center of the entire strategy, is buried beneath layers of success. On the bridge, the wind carries the distant rumble of engines fading into the east. Nagumo turns to his chief of staff, Rear Admiral Ugaki Matomu. By midday, Nagumo says Midway will be finished. Ugaki inclines his head. Yes, sir. No one mentions the Americans' capacity to absorb losses. No one considers what happens when experience bleeds away faster than it can be taught. No one imagines a war where survival, not mastery, becomes the standard. The sea remains calm, the sky clear. And in that calm, the assumptions harden, untested, unchallenged, and moments away from collision with a reality no one on these decks is prepared to face. June 4th, 1942, 6:07 a.m. Aboard the aircraft carrier Akagi, Western Pacific. The flight deck has settled into a strange quiet after the launches. Only the wind and the steady thrum of turbines remain. Below, in the dim light of the operations center, voices are low and controlled. Plotters lean over charts. Signalmen hover near telephones. The machinery of command is calm, methodical, almost relaxed. Then the first report arrives. A radio operator stiffens, one hand pressed to his headset. Static crackles. Then a strained voice from far above the ocean. The words are brief, clipped, formal. Enemy fighters present over Midway. Resistance heavier than anticipated. The message is relayed upward without emotion. Vice Admiral Nagumo listens, nods once, and turns back to the chart. He has expected resistance. Midway is a target, not a surprise. American aircraft flying from land-based fields are no concern. They have been brushed aside before. The men who matter are the carrier pilots, and they are not expected to appear yet. Nearby, Commander Genda Minoru, one of the principal architects of Japanese naval aviation doctrine, studies the plot with a faint frown. Genda is not a man prone to panic, but he has learned to respect patterns. He knows the Americans have been quieter than expected. No harassing sorties, no blind charges. He leans toward Nagumo. Sir, Midway air strength may not be fully suppressed by the first wave. Nagumo does not look up. The second wave will finish it. The assumption is automatic. Another strike, another launch. More of the same pilots, the same aircraft. The solution to resistance is repetition. In the ready rooms below, reserve air crews wait. Some joke quietly, others sit with eyes closed, running through checklists in their heads. They know the doctrine. Strike hard, return, rearm, strike again. The enemy will collapse under precision. At 6:20 a.m., another message arrives, this one more troubling. Ammunition expended at higher rate than planned. Losses sustained. Losses. The word hangs briefly in the air before being absorbed into procedure. A chalk mark is added to a board. A name erased. No one speaks it aloud. The system does not dwell on individuals. Chief Petty Officer Shiga, down in the hangar, pauses as the message filters through the ship. He looks at the empty spaces where aircraft should be. The metal deck plates seem colder now. He calculates automatically. Spare parts are plentiful. Fuel is plentiful. Bombs are stacked in neat rows. Pilots are not. On the bridge, the sea remains empty. No American ships in sight, no contrails on the horizon. The absence reinforces confidence. If the Americans were here, surely they would have shown themselves by now. At 6:45 a.m., the Midway strike leader reports again. His voice is hoarse urgency bleeding through discipline. Facilities damaged but not neutralized. Recommend second attack. This is the first real warning. The plan had called for decisive destruction in one blow. Instead, Midway still breathes, its runways scarred but usable, its anti-aircraft guns alive, its aircraft still launching. Nagumo exhales slowly. He turns to his staff. Prepare aircraft for second strike on Midway. Orders ripple downward. Armorers begin hauling bombs. Fuel lines are connected. Torpedoes are moved aside. The hangar decks fill with activity. This decision is critical, though no one yet understands how critical. Rearming takes time. Aircraft are vulnerable. The carriers are momentarily committed to a single course of action. Another voice speaks up, hesitant but firm. It is Rear Admiral Ugaki. Sir, we have not yet confirmed the location of the American carriers. Nagumo finally looks up. His gaze is sharp. Search aircraft are already deployed. They will report. Ugaki bows his head slightly. He does not argue further. The hierarchy is clear. Doctrine is clear. The Americans are assumed to be behind the curve. At 7 a.m., a scout plane from the cruiser Tone is overdue in its report. Minutes pass, then more minutes. The delay is noted but not emphasized. Mechanical issues happen. Weather interferes. Nothing unusual. Yet beneath the routine, small cracks are forming. In the radio room, a petty officer listens to overlapping signals. American transmissions are chaotic, undisciplined, but numerous. Too numerous. He mentions it quietly to his supervisor. The supervisor shrugs. They always talk too much. On the flight deck, the sun climbs higher. Heat builds. Sweat runs down backs beneath flight jackets. The smell of fuel thickens. Engines are started, then started again as crews adjust to new orders. At 7:28 a.m., the delayed scout finally reports. Sighted enemy force. Bearing 080. Distance approximately 240 nautical miles. Composition uncertain. The words land like a dropped tool on steel. Nagumo stiffens. Enemy force, he repeats. Yes, sir. The operator confirms. Possibly carriers. Possibly. Uncertain. Incomplete. Nagumo closes his eyes for a brief moment. The timing is wrong. The Americans are not supposed to be here yet. Not in force. Not now. He asked the critical question. Does the report confirm aircraft carriers? The answer comes after a pause that stretches far too long. Negative. Report incomplete. The hangar decks below are now crowded with aircraft loaded with bombs for land targets. Torpedoes sit idle, unslung. The carriers are in transition, neither ready for defense nor fully committed to offense. This is the window. The moment when assumptions meet friction. Genda feels it. Ugaki feels it. Even Shiga, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag, feels it without understanding why. The belief that elite pilots are decisive, that quality overrides quantity, that the enemy will conform to expectation, has guided every step so far. And now, for the first time, reality is beginning to push back. June 4th, 1942. 7:55 a.m., high above the Pacific southeast of Midway Atoll. You can hear the engines before you see anything else. A low, uneven roar, dozens of aircraft spread across the sky, climbing through broken clouds. The formation is loose, imperfect, almost sloppy by Japanese standards. Planes drift out of alignment, some lag behind, others surge forward too eagerly. They are American. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, leading a group of Douglas SBD, dauntless dive bombers, from the carrier Enterprise, squints through his windscreen. Sweat beads at his temples despite the altitude. His fuel gauge is already lower than he would like. Navigation has been uncertain. Orders were rushed. Intelligence fragmentary. But they are here. Below them, far below, the Japanese carrier force cuts through the sea in disciplined formation. 4 carriers. Perfect spacing, white wakes slicing the blue water. To McCluskey, it looks almost serene. To the men on those decks, it looks impossible. At 7:58 a.m., the first American torpedo planes arrive. Douglas TBD, devastators from Hornet, flying barely above the waves, slow, obsolete. No fighter escort in sight. On Akagi's bridge, a lookout shouts. Fingers point skyward, alarm bells ring. The calm shatters instantly. Enemy aircraft approaching low altitude. Nagumo snaps his binoculars up. He sees them clearly now. The devastators are ungainly wings, flexing engines, straining. They are not elite. They are not impressive. Zeros intercept, he orders. Mitsubishi. A 6M fighters peel away from their patrols, dropping like hawks. Their pilots are veterans. China, Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea. They know exactly what to do. The first American plane explodes before it can even line up a drop. Another slams into the sea, trailing smoke. Machine gun fire stitches the water around the remaining devastators. Inside one of them, Ensign George Gay grips his controls as tracers flash past the cockpit. His radio is a chaos of screams and static. He presses on anyway. He has been taught the mission matters more than survival. One by one, the torpedo planes die. From the Japanese perspective, it looks like confirmation. The Americans are reckless. Brave, perhaps, but poorly trained. Their attacks are uncoordinated, their aircraft outdated. The Zeros carve them apart with ease. On Akagi's flight deck, sailors cheer briefly as another enemy plane hits the water. Then another wave arrives, and another. Torpedo squadrons from Enterprise and Yorktown follow the same fate. They come in piecemeal. They are annihilated. The sky fills with smoke and falling debris. The sea becomes a graveyard of oil slicks and floating wreckage. Japanese fighter pilots, low on ammunition and fuel, pursue the attackers relentlessly. They are doing exactly what they have been trained to do: destroy the enemy decisively. But in doing so, they are being drawn downward. At altitude, something else is happening. McCluskey and the dive bombers have been searching fruitlessly. Fuel is critical now. He makes a decision that will later be studied endlessly, but feels like a gamble in the moment. He follows a lone Japanese destroyer racing north. It leads him straight to the carriers. At 10,000 feet, the dauntless pilots finally see them. 4 carriers, large, exposed, their decks crowded with aircraft, fuel hoses visible, bomb carts scattered. This is not what Japanese doctrine had prepared for. At 10:22 a.m., the first SBD rolls inverted and dives. On Akagi, there is almost no warning. Lookouts shout. Anti-aircraft guns elevate too late. Zeros are too low, too scattered, too busy finishing the torpedo planes below. You can hear the scream of diving engines, a sound unlike anything else. It grows louder, sharper, unbearable. A bomb strikes Akagi's flight deck near the midships elevator. It punches through, detonating among armed and fueled aircraft below. Another hits Kaga. Then another. Then another. Explosions chain through hangar decks packed with fuel vapor. Fireballs erupt upward, black smoke boiling into the sky. Men are thrown like dolls, steel buckles, paint peels. On Soryu, a direct hit ignites the hangar almost instantly. Within minutes, she is a burning wreck. On Akagi, flames race along fuel lines. Shiga is thrown to the deck as the ship shudders. The lights go out. The air becomes unbreathable. He scrambles blindly, hands, burned ears, ringing. On the bridge, Nagumo is knocked off his feet. When he regains his balance, the world outside the windows is chaos. Smoke, fire, debris falling from the sky. The elite pilots, the irreplaceable core of Japanese naval air power. Many of them are not even in the air. They are trapped below decks, killed by explosions before they can fight. Within minutes, 3 of the 4 carriers are mortally wounded. Only Hiryu remains operational. The shock is total. Orders overlap. Damage reports contradict each other. Firefighting teams die trying to reach sealed compartments. Ammunition cooks off unpredictably. This is first contact, not with American bravery, but with American depth. The torpedo planes that died accomplished something no one on the Japanese side immediately understands. They pulled the fighters down. They exhausted ammunition. They bought minutes. Minutes filled by aircraft that were never expected to arrive together. And in those minutes, years of Japanese pilot training burn away in fuel-fed infernos. The doctrine has been violated. Not by superior skill, but by numbers, coordination, and sacrifice on a scale the Japanese planners never believed could be sustained. The unexpected is no longer abstract. It is burning. June 4th, 1942, 10:30 a.m., Central Pacific over the burning carrier formation. The sky above the Japanese fleet is now crowded with smoke columns that twist upward like black pillars. Fires rage unchecked. Explosions echo through the hulls of once pristine carriers. The ocean around them is littered with debris and men struggling in oil slicks. On Akagi, Vice Admiral Nagumo stands amid shattered glass and fallen charts. Reports arrive faster than they can be processed. Flight deck unusable. Fires out of control, steering compromised, communications failing. Still, the belief does not fully break. Nagumo turns toward the one carrier still intact. Hiryu. Rear Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon, commanding Hiryu, has already reached his conclusion. The battle is not over. One carrier remains, one air group still capable of striking back. And more importantly, many of the elite pilots assigned to Hiryu are alive and airborne. At 10:45 a.m., Yamaguchi launches his counterstrike. Dive bombers and fighters roar off Hiryu's deck, climbing into smoke-stained sky. Their pilots are among the best Japan has. They believe this is their moment to restore order, to punish American recklessness. In the cockpits, there is no hesitation. They have trained for years for exactly this scenario. Strike the enemy carriers, cripple them, end the battle in one decisive blow. At 11:30 a.m., they find Yorktown. American anti-aircraft fire erupts in layered sheets. 5-inch guns thump rhythmically. Tracers climb into the sky. The Japanese pilots press through anyway, diving steeply. Bombs strike home. Yorktown shudders. Fires break out. She slows, listing slightly. To the Japanese airmen pulling up from their dives, it looks like victory. Another American carrier crippled, balance restored. Back aboard, Hiryu reports are optimistic. Cheers ripple briefly through the crew. For a moment, it feels like the old pattern reasserting itself. Skill overcoming chaos. But the Americans do not withdraw. Damage control teams aboard Yorktown work with brutal efficiency. Fires are contained. Power rerouted. Speed restored. Within an hour, she is back in the fight. This is another shock, quieter but no less profound. The American carrier does not sink when struck. It absorbs damage and continues. At 1:30 p.m., a second strike from Hiryu launches. Torpedo bombers, this time escorted by Zeros. The pilots are tired now. Fuel is tighter. Losses have been heavier than expected, but they press on. They find Yorktown again. Torpedoes slam into her port side. Water floods compartments. She loses power. This time, she truly seems finished. The Japanese pilot's radio success on Hiryu Yamaguchi allows himself a thin smile. 2 American carriers hit, one sunk, one burning. The exchange feels almost even now. But beneath that surface, the arithmetic is unforgiving. Each Japanese strike consumes pilots who cannot be replaced. Each loss is permanent. Each damaged aircraft represents years of training evaporating. At 3:30 p.m., the American response arrives. Dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown, now flying off hastily repaired decks, descend on Hiryu. Japanese fighters rise to meet them, but there are fewer now. Ammunition is low. Pilots are exhausted. Bombs hit Hiryu with brutal precision. Fires explode across her deck. Hangar decks ignite. The last operational Japanese carrier is mortally wounded. Rear Admiral Yamaguchi refuses evacuation. He remains aboard as flames consume the ship. His choice is consistent with doctrine. Honor. Sacrifice. Acceptance. For the Japanese fleet, the battle is effectively over. But the misjudgment runs deeper than the loss of ships. By dusk, the sea holds 4 Japanese carriers doomed or sinking. With them go hundreds of aviators. Not raw recruits, not replacements, veterans, instructors, leaders. The Americans have lost aircraft. They have lost pilots, but their losses are absorbed differently. Their carriers survive, their air groups reconstitute. Their command structure remains intact. As night falls, Nagumo is transferred off Akagi. He watches the burning ship recede into darkness. The belief that elite skill alone can dominate war still lingers, but it is cracking. No one yet articulates the truth forming beneath the wreckage. That this was not merely a tactical defeat, it was the beginning of a war. Japan no longer has the human capital to fight. June 4th, 1942. Nightfall over the Central Pacific. The sun slips below the horizon, painting the smoke with red and purple, before darkness takes it all. Fires still burn on the water where carriers once ruled. The sea reflects them faintly, as if remembering what stood here only hours ago. Aboard the cruiser Nagara, Vice Admiral Nagumo sits in silence. His uniform is stained with soot. His cap rests on the table in front of him. Around him, staff officers speak in subdued tones, compiling reports that feel unreal even as they are written. 4 fleet carriers. Gone. The numbers are read aloud carefully. Aircraft lost, pilots unaccounted for, wounded, dead, missing. Each figure represents something far heavier than steel and fuel. Captain Kuroshima Kamito, one of the fleet planners, studies the list longer than the others. He knows the rosters. He recognizes names, men who taught at flight schools, men who refined tactics, men who trained the next generation that now will never exist. No one says it directly, but everyone feels it. This is not a loss that time will easily repair. Out on the water, rescue operations continue under cover of darkness. Destroyers maneuver carefully, their searchlights sweeping wreckage-filled seas. Sailors pull survivors from the water. Many are burned. Many are silent. Some ask the same question over and over. Where are the planes? The answer is everywhere around them. Twisted metal, floating wings, oil slicks that stretch for miles. On the American side, the night is busy but different. Carriers launch patrols, crews rearm aircraft. Pilots are debriefed and fed quickly, then sent to sleep wherever space allows. Losses are acknowledged, but replacements are already being planned. Squadrons are reshuffled. Commanders think forward. On the Japanese ships, there is no such rhythm. In the hangars that remain intact on cruisers and destroyers, spare aircraft sit unused. There are not enough trained men to fly them. Even those rescued are often injured beyond immediate return to duty. The doctrine had assumed that ships were vulnerable, but pilots were decisive. Now the opposite has proven true. Ships can be built again. Pilots cannot. At midnight, Nagumo finally speaks. His voice is steady but low. The enemy has demonstrated unexpected coordination. No one contradicts him. Rear Admiral Ugaki writes in his diary that night. His words are careful, restrained, but the meaning is clear. The Americans attacked with persistence, bordering on recklessness. They lost entire squadrons and continued without pause. They accepted losses that Japan would never allow itself to plan for. This is the turning point, though. No one labels it as such yet. In Tokyo, the first reports arrive hours later. They are incomplete, sanitized. The word defeat is avoided. Emphasis is placed on American losses, on bravery, on honor. But the absence of 4 carriers cannot be hidden. Naval General Staff officers gather around maps that suddenly look far more fragile. They calculate remaining air groups. They count instructors twice. The training pipeline is thin, always has been. It takes years to create a Japanese naval aviator. Years of fuel, years of flight hours, years of filtering until only the exceptional remain. America does not do this. American training produces competence, not perfection. It produces pilots who follow procedures, who survive, who can be replaced. It produces them by the thousands. That difference has now collided with reality. At sea, Nagumo issues orders to withdraw. The operation against Midway is abandoned. The Great Encirclement Plan collapses without ceremony. There is no dramatic announcement, just a course change and the quiet understanding that the initiative has slipped away. As the fleet steams westward, the silence aboard the ships deepens. Men avoid eye contact. Officers stare at the horizon. The confidence that defined the morning is gone, replaced by something heavier than fear. Uncertainty. Chief Petty Officer Shiga sits alone near a bulkhead, hands wrapped in bandages. He tries to count how many pilots he knows are gone. He stops when the number becomes too large. The men who will replace them are still students, or not yet selected, or not even enlisted. Somewhere far away, American factories continue working through the night. Training fields buzz with engines. Instructors cycle new men through patterns and checklists. None of that is visible here. Only the absence is. This is the moment no one wanted to admit existed. The instant when the war changes character, when superiority measured in skill meets an enemy measured in endurance. The Japanese Navy still has ships, still has courage, still has doctrine. What it no longer has is margin. And margin once lost never returns. June 5, 1942. Early morning. Western Pacific retreating Japanese fleet. The ocean is gray and unsettled. Long swells lifting the bows of the retreating ships as they push westward. Smoke still clings to the horizon behind them, a dark smear marking where the carriers burned through the night. The wind carries the faint smell of oil and ash even now. Aboard the cruiser, Nagara. Vice Admiral Nagumo has not slept. His eyes are bloodshot. Reports lie scattered across the chart table, each one a fragment of a larger catastrophe that refuses to fit together cleanly. Shock has given way to confusion. The fleet is still intact in theory. Battleships remain. Cruisers and destroyers escort them in disciplined formation. On paper, the Imperial Navy is still formidable. But the heart of its striking power is gone, and no one yet knows how to operate without it. Orders are issued and revised, then revised again. Course adjustments, search patterns, fuel conservation measures. The fleet moves cautiously now, as if expecting the sky itself to betray them again. Rear Admiral Ugaki stands near the bridge rail, staring at the empty air where combat patrols should be. There are fewer aircraft overhead than he has ever seen during an operation of this scale. The absence is unsettling. It feels like exposure. At 6 a.m., a staff officer approaches Nagumo with a proposal. The words are measured, but the idea is radical. What if we commit the battleships to surface action if the Americans pursue? Nagumo looks up slowly. The idea would have been unthinkable days ago. Battleships were not meant to hunt carriers. Air power had proven that. Yet now, with air cover gutted, the old instincts resurface. Gunfire, armor, direct confrontation. Another officer suggests striking midway anyway with what remains. A symbolic blow. Proof that the operation was not a total failure. Each suggestion is born of desperation. None address the underlying reality. Even if Midway were destroyed, it would not restore the pilots lost. Even if an American ship was sunk, it would not rebalance the equation. On Hiryu, fires still burn. Rescue efforts continue through the morning. Survivors are ferried off in silence. Rear Admiral Yamaguchi is gone. His choice to remain aboard is respected, but it is also one more experienced commander removed from the board. Among the rescued pilots, some are barely conscious. Others stare blankly at the deck beneath their feet, as if still hearing engines and gunfire that no longer exist. One young fighter pilot mutters to a corpsman, "There were too many of them." The words linger. This is not how Japanese pilots are taught to speak of the enemy. At fleet headquarters aboard Yamato, Admiral Yamamoto Isoroku receives the first full operational picture. He reads it twice, then a third time. 4 carriers, hundreds of aircraft, elite aviators, gone. Yamamoto understands immediately what others still struggle to articulate. He knows American industry. He has lived there. He has seen assembly lines. He has seen flight schools that operate like factories. He knows what Japan cannot do. He closes his eyes briefly, then begins issuing orders. Withdraw remaining forces. Preserve what can be preserved. The decisive battle he envisioned has already passed, and it did not unfold as planned. Yet even Yamamoto does not fully grasp how deep the wound runs. Back in Japan, training commands scramble. Schedules are revised overnight. Standards are quietly lowered. Instructors are pulled from frontline units. Men who would have spent years honing skills are rushed through accelerated programs. It is the first compromise. Flight hours are cut. Advanced maneuvers are simplified. Survival becomes less important than throughput. This is not spoken of openly. The language remains proud, but the change is real. Chief Petty Officer Shiga is transferred weeks later to a training unit. His hands still bear scars. He watches young pilots struggle with basics that his old squadron mastered without thought. He corrects them, encourages them, but inside he knows the truth. These men are not ready. They will be sent anyway. In the fleet, confusion persists. The Americans do not immediately pursue aggressively. This is misread as caution rather than calculation. Some officers take comfort in it. Perhaps the balance is not so skewed after all. But American carriers continue operations. Patrols extend. Submarines shadow the retreat. The pressure never fully releases. Every Japanese sortie now feels heavier, each loss more painful, each success less decisive. The shock of Midway does not fade. It spreads. It infects planning rooms, training schools, maintenance depots. It changes how orders are phrased, how risks are weighed, how losses are reported. For the first time, Japanese commanders begin to think about preservation instead of annihilation, about avoiding losses instead of accepting them as the price of victory. This shift is subtle but profound. War as they understood it was supposed to be fast, decisive, controlled by mastery. Instead, it has become grinding, uncertain, and shaped by an enemy willing and able to trade lives for time. The desperate decisions made in these days are not dramatic. There are no grand speeches, no proclamations of change, only small adjustments, quiet compromises, a slow realization that the old way no longer works, and no clear idea of what should replace it. The fleet steams on, carrying with it the weight of an unspoken fear, that the Americans have not yet shown the full extent of what they can replace. June 6, 1942, Western Pacific. 2 days after the battle. The sea looks ordinary again. Blue, endless, indifferent. Only the spacing of the ships betrays that something fundamental has changed. The formation is looser now. Gaps where carriers once sailed are impossible to ignore. The original plan is dead. It does not die with an announcement or a signature. It collapses in pieces across conversations held in low voices, across orders that no longer align with long-prepared doctrine. The great decisive battle that was supposed to shatter American will has instead shattered Japanese assumptions. Aboard the flagship Yamato, Admiral Yamamoto stands alone in his cabin studying a map of the Pacific that suddenly feels far too large. Red pins mark Japanese positions, blue pins mark American ones. The imbalance is no longer theoretical. Midway was meant to be bait. The carriers were meant to be the hammer. The Americans were meant to rush forward blindly and be crushed by superior skill. None of that happened. Instead, the Americans arrived first. They absorbed losses without hesitation. They struck with coordination that should not have been possible so early in the war. Yamamoto understands now that the plan depended on one fragile assumption, that Japan would always fight with its best and that its best would always survive. That assumption is gone. Messages arrive from subordinate commanders. Requests for clarification. Requests for aircraft. Requests for pilots. There are no good answers. The carrier divisions that were to dominate the Pacific no longer exist. Their pilots are not merely dead, they are absent from the future. Every training syllabus that depended on their experience is now hollow. On surviving ships, maintenance crews work tirelessly to keep remaining aircraft operational. But there are fewer sorties. Pilots are rotated less. Fatigue accumulates. Chief Petty Officer Shiga observes the change firsthand. On a forward airstrip, weeks later, he watches ground crews push aircraft back into the open after repairs. The pilots climb in without the casual confidence he once saw. Their movements are stiff, their eyes constantly scan the sky. They know now that skill does not guarantee survival. Training units report troubling patterns. Students struggle with formation flying under pressure. Gunnery accuracy declines. Emergency procedures are rushed. Instructors note these issues, then quietly pass the students anyway. The war does not pause for perfection. At Naval General Staff meetings in Tokyo, strategy shifts from expansion to containment. Maps are redrawn, objectives are reduced, the language becomes defensive. Protect, hold, delay. The collapse of the original plan is not acknowledged publicly. Official communiques emphasize valor and sacrifice. Losses are framed as temporary setbacks, but internally the recognition is brutal. Japan cannot match American output, not in ships, not in aircraft, and now, not in pilots. The training system, once a point of pride, is exposed as brittle. It was designed to produce excellence slowly, not adequacy quickly. It has no elasticity. America's system does. Reports from intelligence indicate new American squadrons forming at an alarming pace. Pilots with only months of training are flying operational missions. Their skill is uneven, but their numbers are overwhelming. Japanese planners debate how to respond. Some argue for conserving experienced pilots, using them sparingly as elite strike units. Others argue that hoarding skill only delays the inevitable. The reality is that there are no good options. Each sortie risks losing men who cannot be replaced. Each delay allows the Americans to grow stronger. In the South Pacific, forward commanders request reinforcements that do not exist. Aircraft are diverted from training schools. Instructors are sent to the front. The pipeline empties from the top down. This creates a vicious cycle. Training quality drops further. New pilots arrive at the front less prepared. Losses increase. Experience drains away even faster. The collapse is systemic. Aboard destroyers, escorting the fleet, junior officers speak in hushed tones about the Americans. They describe waves of aircraft that keep coming even after being shot down. Pilots who crash and are replaced within weeks. Ships that are damaged and repaired in astonishing time frames. These stories spread not as propaganda, but as lived experience. Morale shifts, not into despair, but into something colder. A sense that the war has become something else. Something that cannot be won by brilliance alone. For the first time, Japanese officers consider the possibility of a long war. A war of attrition. A war where loss is cumulative and irreversible. This is the opposite of everything they were taught. Yamamoto writes privately that night. His words are measured but heavy. He notes that the enemy's strength lies not in individual excellence, but in the ability to sustain effort indefinitely. He does not write what that means for Japan. The ships continue westward. The sea remains calm, the sky empty. But the silence is not peace. It is absence. The absence of air cover. The absence of certainty. The absence of a future that once seemed assured. The original plan did not merely fail at Midway. It ceased to exist as a viable concept. What replaces it is unclear. Improvised, defensive, reactive. And for an empire that believed war could be decided by a single overwhelming stroke, this slow collapse of intention is perhaps the most dangerous outcome of all. Late 1942. Japanese held airfields across the Pacific. The heat is relentless. It presses down on the coral runways and jungle-fringed camps, warping metal and exhausting men before engines even start. Aircraft sit under camouflage nets, their paint already faded by sun and salt. Everything feels stretched thinner than it should be. The attempt to recover begins quietly. There is no grand announcement from Tokyo, no declaration of reform. Instead, orders filter outward in clipped phrases. Increase pilot throughput. Accelerate graduation. Reduce non-essential flight hours. Frontline units must be reinforced. At training bases in Japan, the rhythm changes almost overnight. Where instructors once drilled precision endlessly, they now move on after competence is achieved. Landing patterns are shortened. Navigation exercises simplified. Live fire training reduced. The goal is no longer mastery. The goal is numbers. Chief Petty Officer Shiga now works at one such base. He stands at the edge of the runway watching a group of trainees line up their aircraft. Their movements are stiff. Some hesitate on throttle. Others overcorrect. These are mistakes that would have meant dismissal before the war. Now they mean encouragement. Shiga shouts corrections. His voice carries authority, but his eyes betray doubt. He remembers the men who trained here before. How few they were, how sharp, how unforgiving the process had been. Those men are gone, across the Pacific. American airfields hum with activity. Aircraft land and take off continuously. Pilots rotate in and out. Losses are replaced within weeks. Intelligence reports confirm it again and again. Japanese commanders read these reports and feel the pressure tighten. In the Solomon Islands, a newly arrived Japanese fighter unit takes to the air. Their aircraft are the same Mitsubishi Zeros that once dominated the sky. Their pilots are not. They meet American fighters and bombers that arrive in coordinated waves. When losses occur, replacements appear quickly on the American side. On the Japanese side, empty bunks remain empty. After one engagement, a squadron commander reports that several of his pilots froze under fire. They broke formation. One failed to notice an American fighter until it was too late. The commander requests more training time. The request is denied. In Tokyo, Naval General Staff meetings grow tense. Some officers argue that quality must be preserved at all costs, that rushing pilots only accelerates defeat. Others counter that without numbers there will be no front left to defend. Neither side is wrong. Both are trapped by what has already been lost. Efforts are made to improve aircraft performance to compensate. Lighter airframes, more fuel-efficient engines. Concepts are sketched for new fighters that demand less pilot finesse. But production lags. Materials are scarce. Skilled labor is limited. American submarines choke supply lines. In the meantime, the war continues at full speed. At forward bases, young pilots learn the truth quickly. Survival is not about perfect tactics. It is about awareness, luck, and having someone else take the hit first. This knowledge spreads fast. Too fast. It erodes the aggressive spirit that once defined Japanese air combat. Pilots begin to conserve energy, to disengage earlier, to think about returning alive rather than pressing every attack. Veteran pilots notice the change. They do not criticize openly. They understand too well what is being asked of these young men. Each loss now is a wound that never closes. By mid-1943, the pattern is unmistakable. Japanese air units shrink steadily. American ones grow. Battles that once would have been decisive victories become costly stalemates or outright defeats. Attempts to recover momentum fail again and again. Each new offensive burns through the remaining experienced pilots faster than training can replace them. Instructors are pulled from schools and sent to combat. When they die, they take years of accumulated knowledge with them. Shiga hears about one such loss from a fellow mechanic, a former instructor shot down over New Guinea. The man had trained dozens of pilots. None of them will ever hear his voice again. The realization spreads through the ranks not as panic, but as resignation. This is not a temporary imbalance. It is structural. American pilots arriving at the front are not better individually. Some are clumsy, some make mistakes, but they arrive in groups large enough that mistakes do not stop the mission. Japanese pilots arrive alone or in pairs. They are expected to perform miracles. At staff briefings, the language becomes increasingly defensive. Hold this line. Delay here. Inflict casualties. Buy time. Time for what no one can say. Factories in Japan work continuously, but they cannot match the scale across the ocean. New aircraft are delivered to bases that lack trained men to fly them effectively. On paper, recovery seems possible. In reality, every attempt to reclaim what was lost only exposes how irreplaceable it truly was. The elite core that once defined Japanese air power is gone. What remains is a thinning echo stretched across too many fronts. The war grinds on, not with the thunder of decisive blows, but with the steady erosion of capability. By the time senior commanders begin to speak openly about long-term defense, the window for recovery has already closed. What was lost at Midway was not just carriers or aircraft. It was the ability to absorb loss without collapsing, and no amount of desperate effort can restore that. Early 1944. Truk Lagoon. The anchorage is crowded with ships that no longer move with purpose. Battleships sit at anchor like relics. Cruisers rotate slowly, their hulls stained and scarred. Aircraft rest on decks and shore strips, engines silent more often than running. The lagoon, once the beating heart of Japanese naval power, feels exhausted. The realization does not come as a single revelation. It arrives in fragments. A report from the Marianas notes that American carrier air groups are rotating squadrons faster than Japanese units can replace a single loss. Another report from Rabaul confirms that newly arrived pilots are surviving an average of one combat mission. 1. Admiral Koga Minachi, now Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, reads the summaries carefully. He has inherited a force already hollowed out. He has spent months trying to rationalize the imbalance. Now the numbers refuse interpretation. This is not about tactics. It is about arithmetic. At a briefing aboard his flagship, a junior officer presents projected pilot availability for the next 6 months. The chart is stark. Even with accelerated training, even with lowered standards, the curve never catches up. Losses outpace replacements in every scenario. Silence follows. No one challenges the data. No one suggests an alternative. The belief that once underpinned Japanese naval aviation has finally collapsed. The idea that elite skill could offset material disadvantage is no longer defensible. Not after Guadalcanal, not after the Solomons, not after the relentless expansion of American air power. On the flight line at Truck Chief Petty Officer Shiga watches a group of pilots prepare for a sortie that everyone knows may not return. Their aircraft are serviceable, their fuel tanks are full, their faces are young. Too young. One pilot hesitates before climbing into his cockpit. He looks back at Shiga and asks quietly, "How do they keep coming?" Shiga does not answer. There is no answer that fits within doctrine or honor or training manuals. Across the lagoon, American reconnaissance aircraft appear with increasing frequency. They are bold now. They fly high and unchallenged. Interceptors rise late or not at all. When engagements occur, the outcome is predictable. Japanese pilots fight hard. Some die well. It does not matter. American squadrons absorb the losses and return the next day. This is the moment of realization. Not dramatic, not announced, but absolute. Japanese commanders understand that the war has crossed a threshold. From this point forward, every battle will cost Japan more than it can afford. Every exchange will deepen the imbalance. Even victories will be defeats in disguise. At headquarters, planning documents shift tone. They no longer ask how to defeat American carriers. They ask how to delay them, how to inflict enough losses to make progress slower, more expensive. The language of decision has changed. Instructors at flight schools are told to emphasize basic survival. Break off earlier. Do not pursue unless certain. Preserve the aircraft if possible. This instruction would have been unthinkable in 1941. Now it is policy. The psychological weight of this shift settles heavily on experienced officers. They know what it means. They know that when survival becomes the goal, the initiative is already gone. Yamamoto is dead by now, shot down months earlier. His warnings echo without a voice. Others remember his understanding of American capacity, his fear of a long war. Those fears are now reality. On an American carrier operating beyond the horizon, pilots are being briefed for another strike. Some have never seen combat before. Their hands shake slightly. Their training is shorter. Their skill uneven. It does not matter. There are enough of them. Japanese intelligence intercepts radio chatter that speaks casually of losses. Pilots down. Aircraft destroyed. The tone is resigned procedural. That tone is alien to the Japanese side, where every loss still feels personal, irreplaceable. The final confirmation comes not from battle, but from logistics. Fuel allocations are cut. Aircraft deliveries slow. Replacement pilots arrive late or not at all. Units are merged. Squadrons shrink below operational strength. When American forces strike the Marianas later that year, Japanese air defenses collapse almost immediately. The engagement becomes known among survivors as a massacre. Planes fall in droves. Pilots die without firing a shot. There is no shock this time, only grim acceptance. Shiga hears about it weeks later. He sits on a crate reading a casualty list that stretches longer than the page. Names blur together. He stops recognizing units. This is the irreversible moment, not because Japan has lost, but because it now understands it cannot stop losing. The belief in irreplaceable pilots has inverted. Pilots are being spent faster than they can be trained. Their value is acknowledged too late to change the outcome. The Americans did not win by producing better individuals. They won by ensuring that no individual loss could decide the war. That understanding settles across the fleet like a shadow. From this point forward, every decision is made with the knowledge that time favors only one side, and time will not wait. Mid-1945. The Western Pacific. The war has narrowed. The ocean is no longer a vast field of maneuver, but a corridor of retreat. Japanese ships move rarely and cautiously when they move at all. Airfields that once launched waves of aircraft now sit quiet for long stretches, their runways cracked and overgrown, their revetments half empty. What remains of the Japanese naval air arm is scattered, isolated, fragmented into units that exist more on paper than in the sky. On a small coastal base in Japan, Chief Petty Officer Shiga walks along a line of aircraft that will never fly in combat. Some are newly built, their paint is fresh, their engines unused. They are waiting for pilots who will not arrive. The training pipeline is exhausted. Instructors are gone. Students are too few. Fuel is rationed so tightly that many pilots graduate having barely flown solo. There is no time left to correct this. There is no capacity left to rebuild what was lost. Across the ocean, American carrier task forces operate with mechanical regularity. Ships rotate in and out of combat. Crews are relieved. Aircraft are replaced. Pilots lost in one engagement are replaced before the next. The imbalance that first revealed itself at Midway now defines everything. Japanese pilots who do take to the air are often sent on missions with no expectation of return. Some are told directly, others understand without being told. The language has shifted again, this time openly. Words like survival and recovery disappear. Words like resolve and final duty replace them. This is not doctrine as it once was. It is consequence. In Tokyo, the Naval General Staff no longer debates how to win. It debates how to endure. How to preserve some remnant of force long enough to influence negotiations that everyone knows will come from weakness. Admiral Koga is gone lost at sea months earlier. Others take his place inheriting a situation already decided by arithmetic rather than strategy. Reports continue to arrive from the front. They all tell the same story. American pilots attack in waves that do not stop. When losses occur, replacements appear. When ships are damaged, they are repaired. When bases are bombed, new ones are built. Japanese units shrink. Some disappear entirely. Others are absorbed and rename their identities, fading as quickly as their numbers. The human cost becomes abstract only because it is too large to process. Casualty lists fill entire rooms. Names are recorded carefully, reverently, but there is no longer any illusion that their sacrifice alters the trajectory of the war. On the ground, civilians feel the absence of air cover. Bombers arrive unchallenged. Factories burn. Transportation collapses. The war that was once expected to be decided far from home has arrived fully and violently. The moment of irreversible realization is no longer confined to officers or planners. It spreads everywhere. Pilots know it when they climb into aircraft that lack spare parts. Mechanics know it when they improvise repairs with salvaged metal. Sailors know it when they sail without air protection. They all understand the same truth. The core of Japanese air power was built on men who could not be replaced. When they were lost, the system did not bend. It broke. America did not need perfect pilots. It needed enough pilots, enough aircraft, enough time, and it had all three. By the summer of 1945, the skies over Japan belong almost entirely to the enemy. Japanese aircraft rise rarely briefly and at terrible cost. Each sortie feels final, each loss feels absolute. Shiga stands on the edge of the runway one last time as a pair of aircraft take off toward the horizon. He watches until they vanish into haze. He does not know their names. He does not expect to see them again. There is no ceremony, no music, no speeches, only the sound of engines fading away. Weeks later, the war ends. There is no final battle between elite aviators, no redemption through skill, no opportunity to prove what might have been. The consequences are total. An empire built on the belief that mastery could substitute for mass confronts a world that proved otherwise. Years of training, discipline, and sacrifice are rendered irrelevant by an enemy that could absorb loss without losing momentum. The understanding comes too late to matter. The carriers lost at Midway are never replaced in time. The pilots lost with them are never replaced at all. The training system that once defined Japanese naval aviation becomes a footnote rather than a foundation. What remains is memory and absence. In the end, the lesson is not written in manuals or doctrine. It is written in empty cockpits, silent airfields, and ships that no longer sail. The war did not end when the belief collapsed, but it was decided the moment that belief proved false.